It pains to say this, but it's very likely that Cliff Burton did not write To Live Is To Die at all. And I'm not talking about recording, that's obviously done by Jameson. I mean that Cliff did not compose any part of it. Hi friends, it's Andriy Vasilenko, and today we are breaking down To Live Is To Die, seeking things that you might have not known, noticed or cared about. And boy, I'm nervous about this one because it might be kind of controversial. To Live Is To Die is an instrumental composition from Injustice for All album, and it was the longest and the slowest track Metallica wrote in the 80s. It is dedicated to Cliff Burton and is, by popular belief, based on his unrealized sketches. And we see Cliff's name in the songwriting credits, attributed to the few spoken lines. But I could not find a single legit piece of evidence that the composition contains music by the bassist, if not to count mentions in different articles copy-pasted from one another without referencing to the original source of that particular fact. What James Hetfield, it's a reliable source, yeah, said in one interview from 2008 is that To Live Is To Die is an homage to Cliff. They attempted to make it sound like if Cliff had a hand in creating it. Just go and find where Lars or James specifically told they used Cliff's musical ideas for the track. A video, a book, an interview. Please prove me wrong. Until then, I have several more arguments to prove the contrary, which by no means diminishes the value of the song, nor undermines the memory of our hero. We are here to keep it. I hope you understand it, and rest in peace, our teacher. Alright, let's assume that To Live Is To Die does contain riffs by Cliff Burton. Which ones? He could not compose them all. The Chuggy Bridge was written before he even joined the band. It appears on Metallica's rehearsal tape from 1982. And it's quite possible that there's more such examples in the instrumental. So let's break them down one by one. It kinda reminds the Fight Fire with Fire intro, brought to Metallica by Burton. But he was not caught playing the guitar that often, and one needs lots of time and creative effort to compose something as huge as that. Cliff gave his heart to bass, and he spent most of his time to master this instrument. The little down-tuned acoustic guitar he carried around, according to Kirk, served to work on harmonies, and it's way more practical than pulling out and setting up the 4-string motherfucker every time he needed to check just a couple of notes. Especially on tour, with all the transportation and luggage and stuff. So the intro is probably James's. Cliff had never written this kind of slow, dragging, almost primitive kind of riffs. And he almost never did heavy metal licks in general. With the only exception being maybe a semi-exception from the Beatles. But its original pre-Metallica form, it was more of a King Crimson-ish kind of stuff. Cliff brought harmonies to Metallica, and the metal stuff was on the guitarists. So again, the main riff from To Live Is To Die most likely belongs to James. They needed something really heavy and uncomplex to set up the instrumental's dark mood. So the only part that remains is the interlude. The middle section from To Live Is To Die is among the most frequent picks for Cliff Burton's tributes. And to some, the middle section is the whole song. and we are so used to it, so we never even doubt its authorship. You may say, what questions there? How could it be not his? Over time, I began to feel that something didn't add up there. Firstly, what exactly did he compose? The bass line? Which one? The studio version? Or the live version? I'm afraid to disappoint you, but the live version is quite possibly Jason's. This is the type of arpeggio he frequently used. He played it in almost every bass solo. And I cannot recall a single time Cliff played such just the power chords up and down, except maybe Anesthesia. In the studio version, as far as we can hear, there's no fifths and octaves. And it is probably the way it's supposed to be, since Jason was not allowed to improvise on the album. Everything on Injustice for All was dictated by Lars and James, and so the concerts were his creative outlet, so he played that arpeggio. The part sounds so minimalistic and so on point, like a bass arrangement laid on the guitar part. Compare it to the Orion interlude, where Cliff actually played melodies with arpeggio. And which did not interfere with the guitar harmonies. Also written by him, by the way, and he wanted to play them on bass. So in my opinion, he would have done something similar for To Live Is To Die. We can find the arpeggio among James's riff tapes. And it actually sounds and feels like it was actually the starting point in creating the whole section. I could be wrong though, since in a well-arranged song, you may not tell which part came first. Bass, guitar, or maybe drums or vocals. Again, Orion. The main guitar riff leads the groove, while Cliff supports it with a basic bass line. But the riff was written over his chord progression. And so that could be the case with To Live Is To Die too. In the breakdown of 1, I pointed out at how the interlude resembles that of To Live Is To Die. It's just in E minor instead of A minor. And those are the only 2 Metallica songs that have the varied progression. And they are on the same album. And actually this is a norm in Metallica. Riffs of a similar origin even within an album, like it was with Saint Anger and Sweet Ember. But it comes down to what Metallica had to work with. Maybe they simply heard Cliff jam on the progression and the chords stuck in their heads, but the melodies didn't. If there was the demo tape, it would have probably had something more sophisticated. At least some improvisation, not just bare generic chords. And if the tapes existed, Metallica would have included them in the Injustice for All reissue, right? Unless those were lost, which is unlikely, because the tapes are gold. And what a slob one must be to проебать Cliff Burton's demo tapes. But where are his demos anyway? For Ride the Lightning from Master of Puppets, we only have James's and Kirk's. Cliff used a multi-track tape recorder to capture his ideas, harmonies in particular. At least we must have the Orion harmony demo. Back in 2010, when I just began my exploration of Metallica, I recall coming across an article which told about rare Cliff Burton's tapes that had just been found. And it also said that it'd be great if someone takes them and finishes. Who could that be? Who would be the best candidate to finish Cliff Burton's ideas? If that was true, why have not we heard anything about those lost demos since then? If they exist, they would have been leaked on the internet eventually, like it was with the Maxwell tapes or the old rehearsals and drunk interviews of Metallica. If you can reach Metallica and ask these questions, please do it. Thanks for watching. It's Andriy Vasilenko. Be in metal. And rest in peace, Cliff.